Last week, when I walked into my local hobby store, I saw a miniature that I had never seen in there before. It was a very big miniature, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it if I bought it, but here it is, and we can figure out what to do with it together. With absolutely no plan as to what to do with this dinosaur, I began unboxing it. I have the necessary tools, and I know a miniature this inspiring will eventually let me know what it wants to become. Like having a paintbrush in front of drywall, or a golf club in front of a large canvas. I wasn't sure what a 1:35 scale Brachiosaurus would equate to in inches, but it did not disappoint. The kit also came with a baby bronchitis, as well as a 1:35 scale dinosaur tourist, and a second set of instructions in case I wanted to assemble it in a different language. Once all the bags were out of the box, I got the runners out of the bags. And once I got all the runners out of the bags, I got the bits out of the runners. There's a lot of stuff to get out of before you can start assembling these things.
Brachiosaurus.
I quickly removed any leftover flashing and sprue marks and began assembling this very thick giraffe. I was curious to see how well the pieces would fit together at this scale, but as is the case with everything Tamiya that I have put together, it fit just fine. And you gotta respect Tamiya for their quality that is consistent across all of the products they produce. Whether you're making a dinosaur diorama, a World War II encounter, or something in the middle, like a World War II dinosaur diorama. The quality of all their products is fantastic. In spite of the great engineering and the great fit of the pieces, of course there were some small seams between the bigger sections, which I was easily able to fix with a little bit of putty. I removed the excess putty with some lacquer thinner and a toothbrush, and the dinosaur was ready for its next adventure. While I was assembling this, I realized the closest thing that I've ever felt to this dinosaur is the Moomakill from Games Workshop. One thought led to another, and Howdah Partner. A while back, I was gifted these Frostgrave Barbarians by one of my patrons, and I've been looking for an excuse to use them. They may not be the permanent owners of this dinosaur fortress, but it's got to have somebody on its back right now. There's something so fun and calm and relaxing and peaceful about assembling little toy soldiers who look like they want to kill each other. We'll set this little band of barbarians aside until later, and for now, let's break out an old hobby mat and begin kit bashing. The first thing to do was to make sure that this backpack was not going to fall off, which of course meant I needed to make some straps, and for that I used twine, which felt like it had the right thickness for the job. I'm not much of an expert when it comes to saddling animals. I'm also a firm believer in the if it ain't broke, don't fix it policy, so I just copied what I saw on the Moomakill. After the initial twine was on, I used some dried baby wipes to recreate the fabric sections of the straps. I used super thin super glue to lock that in place, and it created something that I don't think I want to inhale. After the dinosaur's back had been macheted with baby wipes and those straps were reinforced with a little bit more twine, it was time to break out the basswood. The basswood. I built two mirrored balcony sections, which will be nice spots for these barbarians to drink lemonade and build their tans, or throw rocks and fire arrows at their enemies. The balcony saddlebag platforms need a little extra reinforcement, so I threw some beams underneath. That way, if the building inspector comes and takes a look at it, he won't give them an answer they don't like. They don't seem like the type of people who would take that very well. After the side platforms were done, I began prepping the floor of the middle area. I gave it some panel lines and drew out the texture using a wire brush. And as soon as I put the middle platform in place, it looked like a picnic bench. But I remedied that by adding a second story with a roof covering. Because this thing isn't intended to only be used by barbarians in the future, I decided to add some safety measures as well, like a small bulkhead on the front and some guardrails on every ledge. To reach the top deck of the Howdah, I made a little ladder that will fit in the hole that I made on the roof. And if the scale of the Howdah being different than the scale of the dinosaur has been bothering you, don't worry, I've taken that into account. The dinosaur is no longer 1:35 scale. It's now Wargaming scale and has entered the realm of a fantasy dinosaur with a Howdah on its back. After adding railing to the roof, I cut up more baby wipes to make some sunshades, which are temporarily stowed and in the upright position for taxi, takeoff, landing, and open warfare. At this point, I felt like adding some greeblies, so I broke out my bits box and I found some sci-fi rotary cannons. Miniguns, that is. I really wanted to add them, but I feel like that might be a little much. Maybe I'll add some magnets so I can give myself the option later. I found a piece of styrene which I heated up and formed into a waving flag using a butane torch, and I mounted that on the back, which I feel helps balance this thing out visually. And lastly, I added what all great ships need, and that's rigging. I didn't feel the need to go too crazy with the ropes, but I definitely needed some reins and a bridle for this giant. I'm sure dinosaurs would be just fine at following verbal commands, but in the chaos of war, when you can't hear anything, a nice tug on the face probably comes in handy. And with that, the construction phase was done, so I cleaned up my workstation before moving on to the painting. But before moving on to the painting, I remembered I needed to give this miniature a base, and I wanted it to be playable, so I didn't give it a chunky base that I would usually give a diorama, but rather a small, lightweight base that I cut in the shape of the largest oval that I could find. I cut that out off camera on my bandsaw and then began texturing the base. I started by giving it a coat of Mod Podge, which I just dumped on and smeared around with a gloved hand, and then I followed that with some Sculptamold, spread unevenly to give it a more organic, earthy ground texture. While it was still wet, I pressed my dinosaur feet into it, and then I set it aside to dry fully, which will be about 24 hours. And in the meantime, we can do some painting. I took everything outside to prime, and while I paint these, I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons. When I came home with this dinosaur, I was strongly considering trying to tie it into the wild imaginary West, but I didn't know how best to do that. So far, we've only seen giant dinosaur bones and never any living dinosaurs, much less saddled with a war gazebo. It's possible that living dinosaurs exist in the wild imaginary West. I'm definitely not saying that they don't, but for now, we'll just say that this fits into the same category as the dirigible or the chupacabra mermaids that I've made in the past. As for other uses for this miniature in the meantime, let me know in the comments what wargaming system and army this could be compatible with. After the airbrushing stage on the dinosaur was done, I switched over to the barbarians. I gave them a 2-part zenithal highlight using a warm mustard yellow followed by ivory. I decided to paint the base coats using contrast paints and then build up the highlights using the wet palette. Like I've already said, these are probably not the forever owners of this dinosaur, but this video was a good excuse to paint some miniatures and get some practice in. I've been working on my mini painting skills more intensely since the Wild Imaginary West Kickstarter because one of the tiers included a full set of painted miniatures by me. So I need all the practice that I can get. And for practice sake, I probably should have used a wider variety of colors, but I'm happy with the contrast. After the soldiers, I switched back to the dinosaur and painted on the details with a brush there as well. After the highlights, I wrapped up the paint job with some washes applied from the airbrush to give it a little bit more variety, and then by this time the base had dried and it was ready to be painted as well. The painting of the base started great, but after the second round of color I threw on a homemade wash that contained isopropyl alcohol, which left a lot of nice spots everywhere, ruining the earthy look that I had established. Wasn't too big of a deal. I pivoted from my normal dirt look and went with a clay pigment powder instead. I then glued the dinosaur into its position. I dusted its legs with the same clay pigment powder, which I sealed with isopropyl alcohol, and then I followed that up with a black coat of paint around the rim. And finally, the last thing to do was to carefully remove the minis from their painting base. After crawling around on the floor and finding that last miniature, I put them all in position for the final shots. And after that, I called it good. That is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Huge shout out as always to my patrons. You guys are the best. Have an awesome week, everyone. I'll see you next time.